Welcome to Reto Makua, a people-centered podcast, and I'm your host, Musa Wenkosi. In today's episode, in our series on the impacts of green hydrogen, we discuss the intricate dynamics of the relationship between the global north and the global south in relation to just energy transition. We will examine this through the lens of South Africa. This episode is part of a series on green hydrogen produced by mining-affected communities united in action and women affected by mining united in action, or Makua and Wamu for short. This is a social justice movement that has a strong hold and organizes communities affected by mining activities in South Africa. This limited series is part of an educational toolkit to support marginalized communities to understand green hydrogen and issues around it. Coming up in this episode, we speak to an activist and academic who has done research around just energy transition.
But if we now look at how the money that's being offered is supposed to be spent, we see it comes with strings attached. We see it goes towards developing those sectors of the economy that are geared towards export, and they're not geared towards building up green industries, green jobs in South Africa. They're not geared towards actually advancing, or not primarily advancing, energy access and energy justice in South Africa. So this is, I would say, it's not a form of payment of climate debt, and it's not a form of climate justice, but actually it deepens the injustices here.
The country has identified green hydrogen as one of the pathways and solutions towards global energy transition and as a strategic investment. And as such, South Africa has received large sums of capital from the global north to help the country to transition its energy sector away from the reliance on coal. The financing model, an export-oriented investment on green hydrogen, however, has raised concerns amongst activists, particularly in the context of an unresolved question regarding the climate debt that countries like South Africa will have to incur while the energy transition agenda is driven by the global north. What does the global north investment towards energy transition mean for us as South Africa? Is it a debt trap, a continuation of imperial control of the global south by the global north? In this episode, we pivot into some of these questions and more.
My name is Tobias Kalt. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Flensburg in Germany. And my work has focused on the global justice dimension of the energy transition. And I focused mostly on conflicts between labor and environmental groups in the coal phase out in South Africa and in Germany. And recently I moved into the field of green hydrogen, and I'm looking at how the partnerships that are being set up between the global north and the global south to import green hydrogen from the global south to the north, what kind of justice implication this has.
As he outlines, Tobias has spent some time here in South Africa studying the landscape, particularly the relationship between the global north and south. For context, my conversation with Tobias began with him defining hydrogen and green hydrogen.
Green hydrogen, maybe to just first define what we're talking about. So hydrogen is an energy carrier. It's not itself an energy source. So it can store energy over a long period of time, and it makes energy transportable. So that is an advantage of hydrogen. And if it's being produced with renewable electricity, it's said to be green. There's also other ways of producing hydrogen. For example, for fossil fuels, then the term is gray hydrogen. And there's also ways of producing hydrogen from fossil fuels, but then trying to take the carbon emissions that are produced in the process and store them over a long period of time. So that would make it climate neutral. And that's been called blue hydrogen, though we should be careful about really calling it climate neutral. But so there's different way of producing hydrogen, and we will talk today about green hydrogen. And this has come up in the last couple of years as an important part of the global energy transition, and especially countries in the global north, and such as Germany, the US, Australia, but also the European Union are at the forefront of developing green hydrogen strategies. And the reason is that green hydrogen can help to decarbonize those sectors of the economy that are difficult to decarbonize with renewable energy. So we talk about, for example, long distance aviation. So it's very difficult to decarbonize aviation with renewable energy alone. So there's a need for green hydrogen, for example, there. Governments in the global north, they need large quantities of green hydrogen. And so they have themselves limited space available and limited political will to actually produce all of that green hydrogen in their own territory. So they're looking elsewhere to get all that green hydrogen from. And this is where the global south comes in, because a large part of the green hydrogen that's going to be used in the north is supposed to be imported from countries in the global south. So if you look, for example, at Germany, they aim to import up to 80% of its green hydrogen demand from abroad, and they have set up strategies such as partnerships and financing instruments to get this green hydrogen from countries like South Africa to Europe. And the global north sees green hydrogen on the one hand as a way to reach their climate targets, while leaving everything as it is. So they can leave their energy intensive industries and just transform them. And they can also gain economic advantages in developing new green industries. They can sell technologies to produce green hydrogens to new markets, such as South Africa. So they want to become a global leader in the new market and protect their industries. So that's the reason why they're now looking into green hydrogen. And there's a couple of concerns then linked to green hydrogen. So green hydrogen needs a lot of land and a lot of energy and a lot of water to be produced. So we're talking about large-scale solar and wind farms that are needed to produce green hydrogen. We talk about water, and there is then some risks and concerns related to that when it comes to getting those resources from the global south. Water scarcity, for example. So many countries that we're looking at that have a lot of wind and solar resources in the south, they are also at risk of droughts and water scarcity. And now taking water from there creates another risk for that. In many countries that we're looking at, there's also the issue of energy access and energy justice. So when large parts of the population don't have access yet to energy, but we're looking at producing renewable energy, then that's being used to produce green hydrogen and is then exported. So that's another concern. And also land, because there's a need for large scale industries that take up a lot of land. There is the risk of producing deep water ports that can disrupt local coastal communities. And there's the risk of producing large scale facilities that can take water from the sea and make it into fresh water. So we talk about desalination facilities that also have an environmental impact on the coast. And all of these industries then create a lot of environmental risks in the areas where green hydrogen is produced. And most of these risks will then be borne by local communities, for example, such as land conflicts or negative impacts on fisheries or marine ecosystems, for example.
Given the impact of green hydrogen that you outline, what has been the role of communities, if any, and in your opinion, and based on your empirical study, to what extent has justice as a principle been a driving force towards shifting to the use of green hydrogen?
Maybe start by talking about the Just Energy Transition Partnership and the way it relates to green hydrogen. Green hydrogen in South Africa, it requires a lot of investment to build up these big facilities. The money needs to come from somewhere, right? So Just Energy Transition Partnership, a partnership agreed between South Africa and northern governments such as Britain, France, and Germany, and the United States, that was made at the UN Climate Change Conference in Glasgow in 2021, that's an instrument to provide finances for building up the renewable energy industry and also green hydrogen. All in all, it's $85 billion US. And that money is supposed to help the country transition to a low carbon economy based on renewable energy and on green hydrogen as well. And now the Just Energy Transition Partnership has just in its name, but we can question how much justice is actually in there. If we look into the Just Energy Transition Partnership, we see that it's quite intransparent. So in the negotiations, there have been very few consultations with civil society, with trade unions. Communities have been left out of the picture. So it's been a very elite-driven process of negotiating this partnership and negotiating the conditions around this deal. And the Just Energy Transition Partnership, it provides money to build up sectors like the green hydrogen industry, but it comes with strings attached. So the money in the JETP, the Just Energy Transition Partnership, is loans. So it's money that has to be paid back eventually with interest, and it comes in hard currency. So it means if the rand continues to fall, it becomes more costly to pay back the debt. So one of the risks there is that these kind of international partnerships that we see to finance green hydrogen, that they increase the risks of indebtedness of countries in the global south. And it creates also a dependency, or it perpetuates dependency of South Africa on its lenders. So workers in South Africa that create wealth that then gets transferred to the global north to pay off debts. And this is a setup that is very unjust and a way to address the global climate crisis. In the Just Energy Transition Partnership, like I said, communities have not been very much involved. So we see that there's now green hydrogen projects that come up in many places around South Africa. There is now a process being put in place where consultations should take place for getting so-called environmental impact assessments. So the project developers, they're required to consult with the communities, but a lot of times we see that this takes place in a limited way. It takes place only with the traditional authorities in some cases, not with the broader community, and it's not around the main cornerstones of the deal. It takes place in a very limited space. So we have the main interests now involved in the green hydrogen debate are interests from international governments that want to get the green hydrogen exported from South Africa to Europe. We have big multinational corporations that have an interest to get this green hydrogen to decarbonize their operations. We have big technology developers that want to sell their technology to produce green hydrogen to South Africa, to other countries in the global south. And they're very much driving right now the green hydrogen debate in South Africa. And the way this plays out then is that the way green hydrogen economy is being set up in South Africa is something that could be described as green extractivism. And green extractivism is a term from academic and activist debates that refers to an economic system that is geared towards export orientation of products. So production for export markets. And we see this with green hydrogen. It's mostly about producing green hydrogen here in South Africa and then shipping it to Europe and to other places around the world. It's not for the domestic market primarily. So that's one part of the system that's being advocated. The appropriation of large scale of land, of water and energy, with the costs that come with that and the conflicts that come with that in terms of land conflicts or reduced access to water. Those costs all stay in the zones of production. Those remain with the communities living there. And another part of this green extractivism that we see is that the political control over this process that stays with the northern government and the domestic elites in South Africa that negotiate these deals. So it's a very elite and investor-driven approach. Like I said, very intransparent. There's a lack of participation. And we see how it also deepens these financial and technological dependencies between the North and the South. So we see there's a need for large sums of upfront investment, and those come from multinational companies and northern governments, and they come with strings attached. So all in all, this creates a system of extractivism, and that means that profits and resources from South Africa are likely to flow to the global north, and while in exchange, the socio-ecological costs and the risks, they stay in South Africa.
How does the global south strike a balance between the competing interests? I'm thinking here the crisis of climate change and also creating sustainable jobs and also safeguarding the economic sovereignty of each country and nation.
So I think the question of jobs is a key question. And with green hydrogen, as with any other big developmental project, the promise of green jobs is always front and center. So we have to really look at this. What does it mean? So what we can already tell is that there will be jobs, but primarily in the production phase of in the construction phase of these hydrogen projects. So in order to set up these projects, there will be jobs in the construction sectors, but those jobs will be limited for a time period it takes to set up these facilities, maybe 2 to 3 years. They're also often not the best paid and don't have the best working conditions. So we're looking at jobs that are in a very exploitative sector, but those are jobs that will be there, but those are jobs that will also likely be only there for a short time. Once construction is over and the project is running, if we think about large solar farms, large wind farms, the electrolyzer, which is the facility to make the green hydrogen, those facilities don't need a lot of jobs, a lot of people working there. So for maintenance and monitoring and operative tasks, there will be some jobs, but those won't be many. The big job potential is there, but it's not just in the maintenance and the construction of these facilities. The big job potential is in building the components needed for these projects. So we're thinking about solar and wind components. If they're manufactured within South Africa, this would create a large new manufacturing sector. It would create many jobs. And then there's also the potential along the hydrogen value chain to think about where else can come up. And industries we created that create high quality industrial jobs. And that is, for example, in the electrolyzer industry. So there's an opportunity to build the electrolyzer, so the part for making the green hydrogen, build it domestically in South Africa, create jobs for that. It would also use the platinum from the platinum mines to produce these electrolyzers. That's an important input. There's also the construction of fuel cells, which is a technology that can be used for vehicles to use the green hydrogen. That those can be constructed. Those can be built in South Africa. And there's the potential of using the green hydrogen itself in some of the industries in South Africa. For example, in the steel industry or in the car industry, there is the opportunity to use green hydrogen there and then produce, for example, not only steel, but green steel. And this would allow the industry to create jobs or to keep jobs. So we have, for example, in Saldanha Bay, a steel plant that was being mothballed that's now supposed to reopen and use green hydrogen to produce green steel. So there are job potentials, and it really depends on if this pathway of building up green industries in South Africa around green hydrogen will succeed or not. And there are potentials there, but the issue here is that if we look at the North-South dimension again, this is not what's being financed by the international community. So if we look at the Just Energy Transition Partnership, the money in there, most of it goes to building up green hydrogen facilities and building up ports and all the infrastructure that's needed to export green hydrogen abroad. Only a very limited amount of money is dedicated to building up green steel industry or fuel cell industry. But what would be needed would be more money being directed into those industry in order to create those jobs in these sectors. So I would say there is potential for jobs and for economic value creation there, but it would also need a reorientation of the finance that's being given by the international community. And just a point to add on that, the international community says the Just Energy Transition Pathway is a way to commit to its climate targets and to finance the energy transition in South Africa. But we should talk about the concept of climate debt, because that's a key demand of climate justice movement. It refers to the fact that the northern countries have caused massive damage to the global climate through carbon emissions. The industrialized nations in the north, they have grown their economies through the extensive use of fossil fuels and through taking resources from the global south. And this has caused climate change. And because of the damage now the global north countries caused, they are actually in debt to countries in the global south. So that's the argument of climate debt. And the argument is that without the colonial exploitation of nature and of workers in the global south, the global north would not have been able to industrialize. So there's a historical responsibility on the global north that they should, on the one hand, compensate for the damage done, the damage that's felt mostly in the global south. And they should also compensate for leaving fossil fuels in the ground and finance a just energy transition. But if we now look at how the money is being offered, is supposed to be spent, we see it comes with strings attached. We see it goes towards developing those sectors of the economy that are geared towards export, and they're not geared towards building up green industries, green jobs in South Africa. They're not geared towards, or not primarily advancing energy access and energy justice in South Africa. So this is, I would say, it's not a form of payment of climate debt, and it's not a form of climate justice, but actually it deepens the injustices here. Create the green industries, the green jobs, but it creates the flow of resources and profits from the south to the north.
In closing, in your view, what will be the solution to the problem that you highlight here of extractivism and accumulation that really is premised on neocolonialism?
I think a key part of this is to strengthen and to build new transnational movements across the North-South divide. So they are to link movements fighting for climate justice and for degrowth in the global North with movements fighting for environmental justice and climate justice, and a different model of development in the global South. Large part of the work needs to be done in the global North. So as I said, there's a need for degrowth to reduce the resource and energy imports that come from the global South, to free up space for countries in the global South to choose freely their own development pathways. There's a need to reduce these dependencies that exist and to just free up space. So I think this is a key part of it. And we shouldn't just look at the national context, but we should see these international linkages that are, and to name them as they are, because they are continuations, a model of dependency between the global North and the global South. So in order to have a chance for tackling the climate crisis and to advance climate justice, there's really a need to start with tackling these the new forms of energy imperialism that we see now, and tackling resisting against the key resource and energy grabs that are now being done by the global North.
That was Tobias Kalt on green extractivism that characterizes investment in the global South. The podcast series, produced in partnership with Action Aid International, is available on our website at www.makua.org.za and wherever you get your podcast. Do follow Makua Wamua on social media for more content on the work we do. I am your host, Musa Nkosi Kabe. Take care.